I'm Bubbles the Clown, and you're listening to the Talk Carby to Me podcast.
I have Kevin Gregory here with me today. Bubbles the Clown returning for another episode go round. So how's it going, brother?
It's going great. As we were getting on the call, we are just talking about the unseasonable weather. So running outside, I haven't done it, but I hear it's really nice this time of year. And usually it's bitter in the low temps, but life's been amazing. Lots of fun and exciting stuff coming up. Q1, going up to Canada at the end of the month for the first DECA Strong event hosted by Pure Impact Athletics. Ryan Kent is also going, but he's going in a coaching capacity. So I will not have the opportunity to go head to head with him, but I'm still excited to go up there, compete in a foreign country, and set the Canadian DECA Strong record.
So that's awesome. So the last time we spoke, you were heading into DECA World Championships.
Yes.
And from what I saw on Instagram, you guys did pretty good, right?
Our team did very, very well. We took home 12 podiums across the board. I think 7 of those were first place. So very good results for the team. Very excited about them. I raced in 4 events. My personal best was I won the co-ed championship with Laura Cummings. Awesome partner. She's super fast. So she carried the team, and I just had to do a little bit of the stations.
Yeah.
The other races I participated in had some hiccups from a first year perspective, but overall it was an amazing opportunity to compete. The vibe was amazing. The people, the energy, it was just overall just a cool experience. Got to meet a lot of cool new people, including the couple that owns this Pure Impact Athletics in Toronto, right outside of Toronto. They went to do the open wave because they didn't even know DECA existed when you could have qualified. So they drove down, competed. I met them there. And then we've just been in touch since. They become a DECA affiliate, and they're hosting their first event. So Jess and I were very happy to share some of our hosting best practices. And then I'm going to drive up over the border in a few weeks and compete at their event. So very excited about that.
That'll be awesome. You know what I'm thinking of right now? Now that you're going to a foreign nation to use your trade. I'm not sure why, but I mean, Netflix just added the entire Rocky saga. So like,
yes,
I've been dabbling in that. So obviously I haven't been running much in the past few months because my foot's been banged up. We're now back to normal. So I went for a run the other day. And just to kind of test it out, see how I was feeling. I'm also a little bit heavier because I've been bulking and stuff like that. So just trying to get the rest off a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, running feels different. And I'm thinking from a mindset standpoint, I'm like, oh, I might not have that dog in me as much as I did flashing back to when I was fine and I could run, every day and stuff like that. So kind of work it back in there. So I started watching the Rocky saga. And obviously, as most of us know, Rocky IV, we have the drama with Ivan Drago. He kills Creed. He flies out to Russia. And he has that training montage in the snow. And he's doing all that work there. So that's all I can think of right now. That's you in your training montage.
Thanks. I think of that whenever I run outside in the winter, especially when it's in the single digits and the weather's blizzardy. We haven't had any of that this year, but
which is insane because you look at Buffalo and what they've gotten, how they've gotten just buffeted with snow, and you saw like the 70 inches and stuff like that. And then, I mean, it's maybe 3 hours, 4 hours from Buffalo to kind of New England where you're at.
5 or 6, but
yeah. Oh yeah,
still not terrible.
Yeah, you're more so in Connecticut, but yeah, you see that, and like it's geographically, it's not too far, and like there's been not much up there. Even when I went up there for Christmas, it was cold for sure, but for the most part, I mean, there wasn't. I maybe saw like a half an inch, if anything.
Yeah, Christmas time, I got really excited looking at how cold everybody else was. I mean, it was cold here, but it was like in the 20s in Miami. I was like, wow, do they even have jackets? How do they heat their house?
Yeah, that's like the world. Well, dude, like so here it got down to, in Raleigh, it got down to, I don't know, maybe 20 degrees, something like that. But the funny thing is, if we have snow in the forecast, like it's like a it's like the apocalypse is coming. It's like, oh my God, and everything shuts down. And, there'll be an inch of snow on the ground, but the ground's too warm for anything to stick. So it turns into basically rain for that final like part of it. And it's like, can't do anything, can't go anywhere and stuff like that. So it's funny that you mentioned running in blizzard conditions. All right. So how often do you actually do that?
Well, similar to you with your foot injury, I also sustained a plantar fasciitis annoyance for most of last year. So I ran a lot in the winter last year, ran a lot in the spring. And then towards the end of the spring, I just had this nagging pain on the bottom of my foot. I could tough it out in a race, or I also referee lacrosse. So I could tough it out for those times when I was earning money. But I didn't have any enjoyment out of doing any training. So my running kind of fell off because I did a lot of conditioning on machines instead. So assault bike, rower, skier, those things, which help me great in DECA because they're very specific movements. But my running's been on the back burner. And I'm also starting to get back into running now because I want to compete in the upcoming season in some things that have running. And most of my running has been on the treadmill, just working on form, very shorter duration, just trying to rebuild that running engine. But traditionally, wintertime, whatever they say there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad gear. So if you get the right stuff, you can run in any temperature, any conditions. So I have a plethora of shoes. If it's icy, then I have shoes with studs in them, so that way you don't slip and fall. But otherwise, if it's just snow, I'll just use regular trail shoes. Full length tights. That's usually enough on the bottoms. Like I'll wear socks, just regular running socks. I don't have Raynaud's or anything, so my wife gets freezing cold just when it starts getting chilly. But I can run. I think we hiked Hunter Mountain in the Catskills. We snowshoed it a couple winters ago. It wasn't a blizzard, but you're hiking in the mountains in the winter in January. So I did that just with regular wool socks, nothing crazy, with regular trail shoes. And then I put the snowshoes on. And then on top, just like a merino wool base layer, and then some sort of shell. I have like a like a windbreaker if it's in the 20s or 30s, because as soon as you start moving, you start cooking in there, you start sweating, and then if you stop, you're going to get really cold. So I try to keep it light on that. And if it's really cold, like single digits, or the wind chill is just insane, I have a North Face shell that I got to race in Iceland in December. And that thing has unzippable armpits, but it's super thick. So it's easy to move in, but you get hot real quick. And then on top, I'll wear like a buff on my head, or I try to just cover my ears because those hurt if I'm not if I don't cover that. And then I have mittens, bleg mitts specifically, or like some sort of gloves for the hands. But that's pretty much what I wear. And then so whatever the weather looks like or calls for, just I know which gear to put on and get out there. And like I said, once you warm up, you can handle anything.
Yeah, I don't really mind the weather. Obviously, me living in North Carolina, it's not as extreme as it is in the Northeast. So a cold run here might be 20 degrees. I remember last year I ran one, and it's funny that you mentioned gear. So I also run in full length tights typically. Just for me, it's more comfortable, especially if we're doing a Spartan race or something like that. I don't like my legs getting all scratched up, even though it's unavoidable. So I actually went out and. Because I'd been reading last winter, I was reading "Can't Hurt Me" by David Goggins, the first book.
Yeah.
And in his book, he talks. It's all about, if you're not familiar with the book or David Goggins, it's all about mastering your mind, putting yourself through these sufferable conditions. Now, he's a certain type of crazy, but in my personal like training style and workout style, like I relate to a lot of his things. And one of them was like he used to go running in the snow, and I think he was in Indiana. And so he would go running in the snow in like a t-shirt or shirtless, and it'd be like he'd have ice all over him, and he's hitting these crazy runs as he's getting ready for I believe he was going into pararescue school or getting ready for the Navy SEALs. It's one of the two. Don't quote me on that, but so I was like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna go do this. I thought my tights were insulated, and they were not. So I just had like the regular, the 2XU tights. They felt great. But it was freezing rain here. There was some snow on the ground. We maybe got like 2 inches, and it was that. And I had maybe like a t-shirt and a waffle top on, and I ran a 10K. So by the end of that, I was pretty like frozen. But I think personally, like running in conditions like that kind of gets you a little bit of a mental edge. So like he talks about that in the book. When you do that personally, like I'll give you an example of the trail that I like to run on. It's maybe like a 6 mile trail. If you take a couple turns, you could probably turn that to 9 to 10 miles. And it's always loaded with people. There's people taking a walk, there's people hiking and stuff like that. It's a pretty popular thing, especially on weekends with the trail system down here. So when you go out there and you see no one except maybe one other guy that's out there, like there's almost like that shot of adrenaline, like, oh, this is different. Like this is the thing that separates me from other people and stuff like that. And I find that would like runs like that, especially in the wintertime, I find way more rewarding than it's 60 degrees. It's cool. It's not bad. And you kind of go do your thing. So that was one of the things that I'm looking forward to. Granted, it's probably only going to snow twice here, but I'll definitely be out there regardless. Same thing with running in the rain. Running in the rain is super peaceful. It's a little annoying. So as long as you waterproof your shit, for the most part, you're not going to be too affected by that.
The also that other guy or girl that you see when you're doing those crazy runs, you just look at them and you give them the glance of much respect, friend or bro or however you say.
Yeah, and
like, that guy.
Yeah, and I've seen that guy. I've seen this guy before. I've never met him. If I ever should I see him again, which I probably will, because he's he lives in my neighborhood. I'm gonna have to be friends with this guy. Like he was so happy to just see another human out there.
Yeah,
and
it gives you a huge boost.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Have you read the new Goggins book?
I listened to You Can't Hurt Me like multiple times, at least 2 or 3. Because I'll just listen on these long ass runs and you just F this, F that, like lots of cursing. So if you're averse to that, then don't listen to it. But otherwise, there's a lot of 40% stuff in there.
There's a clean version of it. So yeah, his new book never finishes out. So that's my current read.
I did see that somewhere. I didn't pick it up yet.
Yeah, it's kind of like a follow up. I'm not fully done with it, but there's some good points to it too. I think kind of where he's going with this version of it is like he's become famous. He's had the book. He's popular. He's become famous now, and he gets a little soft. And he's kind of going through that. And obviously it's talking now, but he's referring to like the last like 7 years or so, and kind of going through that. So they're definitely super relatable. For anyone, for almost anyone really. When everyone reaches that point where you kind of think to yourself, am I still this guy? Do I still have it in me, and things like that? And he kind of goes through that. I think one part that I think is super hilarious, right? So obviously with fame comes, a lot of hate. And
there's a lot of Goggins haters.
Yeah, everyone who has their own like, they get their criticisms, they get people hating on them, they get people saying it's not real, it's fake, or you're a fraud, stuff like that. But he talks about this in the book, the new one. He actually takes them all, prints them all out, all his negative comments, and he reads them to himself and then creates an MP3 file or MP4 file or whatever format that he does. And then he goes running while he's reading all his negative comments and their racial slurs and you're a fraud, you're a phony, you're a fake, you never did anything in the Navy, stuff like that. And so it's just absolutely hilarious that that's how he chooses to process that.
Yeah, I think we all find our motivation from the carrot or the stick or some version, but he's definitely very stick motivated.
No, he's beyond stick mode. Like this guy, he almost like creates the stick.
Yes. Here's the stick. He takes the stick and he wraps it in barbed wire, and then he puts it in the fire, and then he beats himself with it.
Yeah, and just replays it like over. He's a wild man. So Kevin obviously is here with us today. We're going to be chatting about some probably running recovery. We'll talk about some events, some changes to specific obstacle course races that we'll be participating in that are rather interesting. Obviously, there is no Sandra today, as she did have her baby finally. So congrats to Sandra. The Talk Carby to Me team has a new member, so we'll be looking forward to that this year. So one of the things that has been happening lately in the fitness world that I kind of wanted to pick your brain on a little bit. We've been seeing a lot of studies that have been disproving a bunch of things that have been going on, right? So obviously you have the Liver King situation, right? Which is one hilarious too. I'm sure you've heard about that, but it's also not surprising. But one of the things that's kind of started to have like reach like leaked out is when you look at movie stars who play superhero roles, right? So traditionally journalists and reporters and stuff like that, when they talk to them and they're like, hey, like you got ready for this role, like what'd you do? And I had a great trainer, and a lot of them have great trainers behind them. But it's starting to get a little bit more where it's like they recently talked to The Rock about it, and they try not to. If you look at all their interviews, they always avoid that question. So their handshake deal. Hey, please don't ask me about this and stuff like that. But Joe Rogan and the guy from More Plates, More Dates actually talked about that. But they talked about The Rock, and then IGN did an interview with Hugh Jackman talking about he's reprising his role as Wolverine in Deadpool 3, and this topic of steroids came up, and he's like, oh, I'm not going to be taking steroids, or there's nothing like going on as far as that, like the side effects are bad and things of that nature. And maybe it's me as a fitness professional, but I'm looking at it and thinking, I'm like, dude, there's no way. Like, what are your thoughts on stuff like that?
I think that there's other things that you can do to improve your physique or your muscle development other than quote unquote steroids, like anabolic steroids with a needle and whatnot. But to lump them all together, like, yeah, steroids are bad, everyone knows that, but they obviously get results. But they also have long-term consequences. Talking to the CEO of Fit Nutrition, who was the nutrition partner of the gym that Anthony and I used to work at. He openly admits to abusing steroids when he was a Mr. Olympia competitor back in the 70s or whatever year that was. And he's like, everyone did it. That's what the norm was. Now he has countless injuries and health problems related back to his use of steroids back then. So everyone knows steroids are bad, but there's other things you can do, and then everyone kind of like lumps them together. There's as performance enhancing drugs in sports. There's like the illegal side, and you're breaking the rules, or you're like the Russian Federation of all their sports being suspended. Like PEDs are definitely out there, but not all PEDs are steroids. So I think ethically in sport, like if you're anyone at the top tier of the sports doing everything they can, tiptoeing the line with the rules to maximize their performance. They're trying to get as much of what they can out of what is available. They're working with the best scientists, the best doctors, and whatnot. And if you look back over the last 15 years, all the Barry Bonds, A-Rod, all those like the clinics in Florida, that the HGH and all that stuff. So some things are like ahead of the curve, but like if it's for a movie role, if someone's going to pay you like $10 million, you're probably going to be open to doing almost anything it takes to earn that. And if that's your whole like livelihood, then yes, it's bad, but we do a lot of bad stuff all the time. But what's the cost? Like most of us do dumb things that are bad for our health and for no payout at all. So for like someone to make millions and millions of dollars, it definitely doesn't put them up as a great role model for young children or like adolescents or whatnot. But they're growing into the role of the movie. So, I think it's their choice, but
yeah,
there's a lot of ethical issues around the whole thing.
So I think, obviously you touched on it. There are tons of side effects. Like the side effects are large. I mean, there's a couple things too when you become that large of a human, and let's say you far exceed your genetic potential for growth, size, and stuff like that. Obviously, there's some factors that are not going to be affected by it, like your bone structure and things like that are not going to be able to keep up with the amount of force and weight that you kind of produce and things of that nature, as like where some of the injuries and stuff like that come from. But you touched on the responsibility factor. So obviously in sports, right? If those are the rules, those are the rules. You do see, I think baseball personally should have just let it rock. The sport, while it's America's pastime or whatever you want to call it, if you still believe that, good for you. It is boring to watch. It was more exciting that way. It's almost the same kind of concept as like football. Football, there's a potential to be injured and stuff like that. Performance enhancing drugs can give you the potential to have some side effects, injuries down the road. But with it being so rampant, because even though they're like, oh, this guy popped out, Barry Bonds popped out, McGuire popped out, Sosa popped out, like the whole league was doing it, and then you're trying to keep up with those guys, right? So Dave should have just legalized it. And their sport might have an entirely different market now. But when you look at like the acting world and like the responsibility and things of that nature, I think it's a double-edged sword, right? So on the one side, you have Wolverine, who's been a character in comic books for I don't know what 50 years or something like that. You take any of the major like buff heroes that you have, and you look at it as far as that responsibility and role model for kids, and it's like, sure, you don't like a kid that aspires to be Captain America. You don't want him to be like, oh, I have to take steroids to get there and things like that. And I think the flip side of that. Now, that doesn't mean you should, if you're on steroids and you get ready for a role because you're going to get paid $30 million for the role, you want to earn your $30 million, you want it to come out good. There's a lot of benefits to that. Like, sure, you're going to be doing stuff. But I think on the other side of it, like from a body image standpoint, like you aspire to be Captain America all your life and you want Chris Evans' body or you want Thor's body, right? Chris Hemsworth, with him there, or even, Hugh Jackman Wolverine, that's what you aspire to. And you never actually get there. And you're like, damn, I can't get there. And like, these guys have this diet and I followed the diet. And then a lot of times they list out their workout programs and I listed out the workout programs. And that can just compound into like, I can't do that. And like body image issues and things of that nature. And I think that's where the other flip side of it too, because to me personally, I would love to look like Captain America, right? And let's say Chris Evans, as he's in his role, is like, oh, I take steroids to get there. And me personally, I'm doing everything that he's doing. And I don't get to where he's at in the same amount of time. I now feel like a failure as opposed to it's like, oh, I did, take a little something just to help me out for a couple months. I went on a cycle and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Why I didn't get that same result because I'm not willing to, take that risk or whatnot. So I think it's a super interesting topic, especially as you see these actors get older. And you see them like The Rock has herniated disc, but he's Black Adam and he's like the most jacked dude on the planet. And it's like,
Yes, the responsibility piece is definitely a different angle, but they're also playing superheroes. They're fictional characters.
Yeah.
So like, write it off. It's a superhero. You're never going to be as big as Leonardo in the freaking Ninja Turtle movies because you're not a turtle and you're not like through all this other stuff that got them there. So just lump that all together.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. The other, so have you seen, so you brought it up too. We talked about Rocky IV. You brought up the Russian Federation. Have you seen the documentary Icarus?
What's it called?
Icarus. It's on Netflix.
I watched a documentary. I don't know what it was called. Because when I got COVID, I just watched everything. And there was a Floyd Landis thing. So he like worked with a Russian doctor and then they talked about a lot of like the secret PED use over there. And I know there's like a dozen more. That's the one? Okay.
Yeah. So that one kind of goes through where he runs like he participates in the amateur version of the Tour de France.
Yeah.
And then he links up with the doctor. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but he actually is the anti-doper for Russia, for the Russian Federation. And he's like, okay, if I'm going to do this now, obviously he's not doing it in a professional tournament because that would be, unethical. He's just doing it like him versus him. So he sets a benchmark and now he's going to conduct his research, his experiment. And he has this guy help him along. And as he's going through it, he's like documenting the whole process, like how he's recovering and things of that nature. And the whole story with the Russian Federation kind of breaks and he ends up saving this guy and getting him to the United States. And then the guy just starts spilling the beans. And it's like, they have these doping camps and like, this is how you go through it. So when you look at like that happens probably in the last 10 years, and then you look at, or whenever the Sochi Olympics were, and then you look at Rocky IV and you have Ivan Drago and it's like that pride and like kind of what they're doing and what they're going after. And like Ivan Drago is like the symbol of like this freak human going against, your Rocky Balboa, the average, champion American So it was actually really funny, like making that comparison. So I've been thinking about that a lot because I was watching that, and you brought it up, and it's just funny to think about.
Yeah, so you're telling me this just started recently? Like they knew back in the '80s when they made Rocky that the Russians were doing all this shit, and it took them this long to like break the story.
Furthermore, if you look at the physique from from Sylvester Stallone in episode in the first movie to the second movie, then to the third movie, it is stage ready bodybuilder, completely different human, completely different animal that's going on there. So it's wild.
I do like. Oh, sorry.
No, you had.
I was gonna say from the watching Rocky 4 and seeing all the stuff that they do to Drago, like steroids aside, all the other like lab testing and all that stuff, I feel like is not everything, but so much of it's available these days for everybody, like VO2 max testing and like I'm gonna lose all the technical jargon, which is gonna ruin your whole audience because they won't understand what like the metabolic testing, gas exchange, and all this stuff. But it's cool that a lot of that's available now. Like you could do blood tests with like the Inside Tracker company does. You can send your blood to them and they do a blood test for you. There's DNA tests to find out your muscle fibers, and like I feel like all that stuff when I saw it in Rocky was cool, but then as I see like companies that do that now in a way that the average Joe can have it tested, it's like, wow, it's really like it's becoming more mainstream and easier to access than being at the top tier of best athlete in the world.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think the fascinating thing is if you look at any of those protocols that you run or anything like that, I think that probably the most obvious benefit to anything performance enhancing, or even if you have things that aren't performance enhancing, and like you look at fibers, you're looking at blood tests, you're looking at hormone levels, you're looking at force production, things of that nature. Everything is so based on recovery, right? So so following those metrics, the reason they're important to know about. So if you just walk down the street and it's like, what's your VO2 max? Most like 99% of people aren't going to know, right? But knowing that information allows you to have a better understanding of how your body works, what you can handle, how you can recover, and things like that. And obviously, if you have a good protocol like that and you're more aware of it, you can kind of track it, and you can once you track something, it makes it easier to measure, and you can improve it and things like that. So that's a super fascinating like world. And yeah, it's almost like when you look at like the Jetsons, how like they had FaceTime in the Jetsons, and now we have FaceTime here, and things of that nature. We don't necessarily have flying cars, but we've got the robot assistants and things like that. So it's pretty cool to see like the industry kind of catch up. So another thing that me and Sandra talked about this, we had the red meat study, right? Did you hear about that one?
No.
So what they basically did was they had a control group, and they were set out to hypothesize, is red meat actually bad for you, right? Does it increase your risk of cancer, diabetes, and things like that? And they found almost no link to any of those factors. There was a slight increase in, like a very, very small increase in breast cancer and one other form of cancer, but no difference in diabetes for consumption, no difference in heart disease, no difference in the increase in any other forms of diseases as well. So that's finally that. I feel like that long overdue as far as with that. And now you see that goes well with, you look at the carnivore diet, right? The people that focus on the kind of carnivore diet that have having good luck and stuff like that. And it kind of gives that a little bit more validity and things like that.
Yes, all these trendy diets, it's like as soon as they come out with all their like scientific backing, everyone jumps on board, and then give it enough time and someone's disproving it. Like in the early 90s or maybe in the 80s is like low fat diets, and then low carb diets came around, and then now vegan is like huge, and then look obviously the other stuff, keto, carnivore diet, those kind of things, but it's as absolute as everyone is in any specific like track, give it a little bit of time and someone's going to disprove it on further research, or they get enough of a sample size where they're like, well, actually it's not as good or bad as what you thought. So
yeah, and I'm a big red meat guy. I love it. I feel better when I eat it. So much so and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Right. So you have some familiarity with my training style. Usually in the gym, I work out as a bodybuilder. That style is more so kind of like where I live. But I also do endurance training, right? So any given week, I'm running between 20 and 30 miles, right? And there'll be some half marathons mixed in just as like a training run. So even though that is a lot of miles for those listening, I'm not running like I would like a race. Like it's not like a life or death thing. You know what I mean? I'm going out, I'm trying to get work in without crushing my body to an extent. I'm fascinated by the carnivore diet, and I actually am thinking of going on the carnivore diet. However, my hypothesis is like, so the people that have good luck on the carnivore diet, or like even the lion diet, because you could say, you know, they have some adverse effects or maybe some inflammation or allergens that go under the radar and conditions that derived from plants and their interaction with carbohydrates of that nature and stuff like that. So some people report better energy. Some people report, you know, with these conditions that usually aren't treated, like just kind of go away. I really don't suffer from any kind of major conditions that are lingering or anything like that. I have a pretty strong immune system. But my thing is like, could I do that training style on a carnivore diet with pretty much the absence of carbohydrates in my diet?
I think it would be fun to document. I don't think your top end speed's going to be good, but if you're just doing base runs and you're just keeping like zone 2, zone 3 just for conditioning, I think you can still build your aerobic base on that end. As far as like lifting, I think you'll build muscle because you have protein and lots of that. But I don't know if I guess you're going to have a lot of creatine in your body because of the red meat.
Yeah.
But your glycogen won't be as topped off as if you were eating carbs. So it'd be interesting to see where I think you probably get stronger, but I don't know if you'd have the endurance. But I feel like explosiveness for your first couple reps would be good because you got the creatine stores full. But like I said, with the running, I feel like if you keep your heart rate in zone 2, zone 3, you're going to feel good and you'll probably be able to sustain that. But if you start getting to do too high intensity, I think it's going to blow you up because your body's going to start cannibalizing your muscle mass. That's my hypothesis. So
yeah, that's mine too. And that's one of the things that I find fascinating. So I would expect maybe after like a month or two, like the change that I see is a 1 mile run, a 2 mile run, a 3 mile run that feel really good. Once we approach that kind of 10K range, you know, we might start to see a little difference there. So that's probably something that I'm going to work in this year just to kind of test it out and things like that. And that'll be good to go. It's great segue actually, right? So the other thing that was recently released, right? And this ties in perfectly with New Year's resolutions. We all know someone looking to get back in shape. As trainers, you and I, you know, we've worked in gyms, we've seen people, the cardio deck is popping in January, right? Always. And so they did a control study where they were looking in obese populations, right? So to be clear, they're looking at obese populations. And what has a better effect on fat loss? Is it doing cardio with a hypocaloric diet? Is it doing just the hypocaloric diet, or is it doing resistance training with a hypocaloric diet?
that's 3 options.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what they found was that resistance training was the way, as far as the primary vehicle, was the best effective way to lose weight loss or to induce weight loss, specifically from the body fat metric.
I think that's what, as trainers, at least for me, I've tried to explain that to people for years. People just want to come on the treadmill. If you want to walk and go slow, like great, that's way better than sitting on your ass. But it's not going to, you'll probably lose a little bit of weight. But if you start doing higher intensity exercise, going on the treadmill and your heart rate starts drifting, you're deconditioned. So your heart rate's going to go high. So you pretty much have to walk really slow to just get that fat burning zone. But most people don't know how to go slow, including athletes. We're supposed to do base runs in a low heart rate, and we always take off and go too fast.
Yeah.
But once you start getting your heart rate too high, you're burning glycogen, which is not body fat, and then you're going to start cannibalizing catabolizing. I like to call it cannibalizing because you're eating your body.
Yeah.
And so you might lose a little bit of weight, but you're going to break down muscle mass, which then decreases your ability to burn fat. And then you get even a you might have a nicer number on the scale, but it's not, you're going to be tired and there's all these other bad things versus doing it correctly and build some muscle mass. Then your basal metabolic rate goes up. So your ability to burn fat increases. And then you don't have to kill yourself. So why would you want to go kill yourself for worse results versus do something that's a lot more comfortable and get better results?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mind.
Yeah, and a lot of people, and since the theme of this, a lot of what we're going to be talking about is recovery, and cardio is great for teaching your body to the mechanisms for recovery, right? Also, when you do cardiovascular exercise, your cardiovascular system improves. When your cardiovascular system is improved, blood and nutrients travel around your body more efficiently. Your heart is more efficient. That's why your heart rate drops the more that you do it. And you acclimate and you make some progression there. But also, like when you look at force production, right? You need blood to go to areas to produce force. As your muscles produce force, if that system that lies underneath is working well and it's working efficiently, right? That's going to be faster. You recover better between sets. You're going to recover better between workouts and stuff like that. And so, like, if you go out and do cardio and you were doing cardio and you're like, oh, I'm doing this to improve my heart health, and that would be, a very logical explanation. Then you pair that with some strength training and you've got some magic going. But yeah, you see it all too often, especially just starting out and you pick running as your modality, let's say. Like that repetitive pounding as just going to be your first thing. You're choosing the most, I would say,
detrimental.
the thing with the least, the thing that you can squeeze the least out of in the beginning. I guess it would be the way to say that, because there's plenty of people that'll go for running, but if you haven't been running in a while and that's becomes your first modality and you're overweight, you're going to have way more pressure on your joints, maybe, your ankles, your knees, and things like that. If your form is off and stuff of that nature, and muscularly, you just might not be used to the pounding, right? So it can be crushing at times and stuff like that. So I find it very, 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 very fascinating. And I think it's a good thing that they finally put that out there. Like, hey, pick up something heavy and like get to work.
Yeah, it blows my mind that people choose like seemingly the hardest thing to do, as you said, that gets you the least results, because of all the other things you said, the beatdown, and then the lack of recovery. Because when you're pounding your joints, that's not just that inflammation and pain is not going to cease like the next day. You're going to be sore for days. Granted, if you do lift weights properly, you're going to have some soreness a few days later, but it's in the muscle belly, not in the joints where you're, oh, my knees hurt. I sprained it years ago, or I don't have any cartilage or whatever. And then the landing, people's running mechanics, just heel striking, overstriding, creating all that impact, which causes lots of other issues. It's interesting that everyone thinks that that's like the way to go to start.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see it in, you see it in a lot of times. And if you think about it too, like that, like, so when me and you, we both work out and we both run a lot, and our bodies are pretty conditioned. And it's like, even for us, like sometimes we'll hit a run and like we're blown up, afterwards, and we're used to this stuff like that. So you can imagine like someone just kind of starting out getting into it. Not only do you have the cardiovascular effect, where it's like, oh my God, I feel like I'm dying. And then on top of that, you've got all the pounding and things like that, and something that you're not used to, like that recovery window is going to be massive.
Yes. As to quote the dot fit guy again, Neil Spruce, he always used to say, you can only train as hard as you've recovered from yesterday's workout. So I think that exemplifies the theme of the whole episode here. If you beat the shit out of yourself on Monday and you can't work out again until Thursday, what do you expect to gain if you're only doing like 2 days a week of exercise, and then do that again? And you're just constantly going to be in pain. And if you're constantly in pain, you're not going to be excited to do something new. But you can I think one reason why everyone jumps on the treadmill, now that I think about it, is they have a magnificent little screen that tells you how many calories to burn. And everyone thinks, if I'm burning calories, I'm making progress. And if you turn the treadmill on 10 miles an hour and you stand on the side, it actually shows that you're burning calories, even without you standing on it. So the
Yep.
little counter is going up. And then you get on there, and if you put it on like 3 miles an hour, it's like, all right, the counter's not going up fast enough, as fast as I wanted to. Let me turn up the intensity. But you don't see that. You don't see the calorie burn. Everyone, that's their measure of success, and it drives me nuts. Like, everyone has Apple Watches now. Like, before, if you wanted a fitness tracker, you got like a Garmin or something, you invested all this money in a fitness watch, even Fitbits. But now with everyone with their Apple Watch, like, oh, today's workout sucked. I only got 200 calories burned. It's like, well, if you strength trained, you're going to burn a lot more calories when you leave here, continuing for the rest of the day. Not just that 200 you had here, where when you stop cardio, you're not going to keep burning because your heart rate's going to go back down and you're going to be back at rest. So,
yeah, the wearable devices, the wearable device technology. Boy, that's a fascinating thing, right? It's last time we were on here, we talked about the little Tamagotchi thing, right? It just gives you a little insight into yourself. Shout out to the Tamagotchi. But also, like, they've done studies, and I'm sure some are more conclusive than others and things like that, but those things are not accurate. That doesn't mean that they're off necessarily. They're not going to give you some kind of insight, but it certainly shouldn't be something that's taken as like the gospel, right? So I think their Fitbits, Apple Watches, stuff like that, they're great. They're fantastic for showing you as an indicator of like movement in general, right? So they count steps for you. Like, okay, what I was doing, I had my heart rate kind of elevated, so that probably helped me burn some calories. So that helped me, burn XYZ or achieve this, that, and the third, which I'm not really used to. But when you look at it and you see, oh my God, I burned 700 calories, you probably didn't. You probably burned closer to 400, if that. It's just a calculation, and even worse when you look at the cardio machines, right? So if me and you, like, there's probably about maybe 25 pounds between us, yours is going to be different than mine because your body takes more energy to move than mine does. And so if we're on the same treadmill, it's going to show us the same number, whereas that's not the case. So that's something that I think a lot of people miss. I mean, I don't wear my Apple Watch anymore. Mostly because I don't pay attention to things like that. I haven't really been wearing my Whoop a lot either. So Whoop I found the data that Whoop gives you pretty fascinating. In the sense, when you look at recovery, you can see I'm gassed today. How did I sleep last night? It gives you some deep insight on that. You can also see the other day I was super stressed out. I was running all over the place. On top of that, I worked out and things of that nature. And it'll kind of show you, like, through data and analytics, like, oh, I've had a really stressful week and I can see how that affects my body, right? Because things like that can alter your heart rate, whether you're at rest or whether you're working out, and the total amount of work that it's doing throughout the day. So stuff like that is that I find like pretty useful and insightful, but I rarely ever look at it and say, oh my God, I burned 3,800 calories today. Like, this is awesome. Like hell yeah.
boring.
Yeah. So when we're talking about recovery and stuff like that, so recovery is like the low hanging fruit. So if you're just starting out in the gym, that's probably going to be what's going to become the hardest to achieve as far as the good rhythm, right? So you can be taught to work out, you can follow a good plan. There's plenty of information out there, right? Nutritionally, that's really a will thing as far as that. And as far as like, okay, can you do this 80% of the time? Can you eat cleaner foods? Can you prioritize protein, vegetables, and stuff like that? When you look at recovery, even you look at elite fitness professionals, you look at elite athletes, you look at the general population, you look at beginners and stuff like that. That's probably where like the lowest hanging fruit is probably going to rely. So what are some things that have worked for you personally for recovery and like have worked for your clients specifically, especially in the beginning?
As you mentioned, low hanging fruit. The simplest things make the biggest difference. And then after you nail those down, the next level stuff's a little harder to implement, but it's really only moving the needle like a tiny bit. So the biggest bang for your buck is the simple stuff. Making sure you get enough sleep. Not everybody needs the same number of hours of sleep, but if you're trying to run your body off 4 hours of sleep, just working, and then you're trying to add in more stress, which is exercise, which is good stress, but it's still stress on your body, you need to increase your sleep. Your body's not going to balance out your hormones, and it's not going to get you the gains that you need. So how do you get better sleep? Some people are too busy. Well, it's easy to gain more hours of sleep. You just turn up the TV and stop staying up watching Netflix or TV all night or whatnot. And I know people have different family situations. So if you're taking care of like an elderly person and they constantly have you up, that's probably not going to be an option. But there's different ways. You don't have to hit it 100% on the head to get improvement. You just need to take a step in the right direction. So sleep is the best performance enhancer. If you have the flexibility, I know when I'm training super hard and I'm preparing for a competition, I'm trying to get as much sleep as I can at night, but then I'm also trying to figure out how can I get a nap in the middle of the day, because sleep again is the best way to have your body recover. And sleep hygiene goes a long way. So trying to make your bedtime and wake time consistent as much as possible,
Oh yeah.
that's good. And then working on your wind down routine. So figure out, okay, I want to get 8 hours of sleep tonight. I'm going to wake up at 6. What time do I need to not go to sleep, but what time do I need to start getting ready for bed? So that way, not when my head hits the pillow, but will my eyes be closed and I'm shut down by the time I want to be going to sleep? If you're climbing in bed the time you're supposed to fall asleep, chances are you're not falling asleep for a while. So refining your wind down routine, there's plenty of like studies with stop your exposure to blue light like so long before bedtime and whatnot. And I mean, my wind down routine is don't like, I guess you could take a shower or not, like figure out what works for you. But for me, like my biggest, most important thing is just lay in bed, read a book, not a Kindle, not my phone, just read a book. And that settles my like nervous system down. It also fills my head with positive like stories or information, and then that kind of makes my eyes tired and I put the book down, turn the light off, and then I'm ready to fall asleep. That's my like go-to. If I have like a huge race and the next day is super important, then I'll do some more stuff, maybe like a Epsom salt bath before with some nice like lavender essential oils or something. You could take melatonin, that'll help you like rest more soundly, or CBD is uh, on the rise of popularity. So there's a lot of things you can do to increase your sleep quality, but trying to make sure like eliminating light. If you have a ton of lights in your room that or things that have light, like Ben Greenfield, the first time I ever heard this, I was like reading something from him, and he's like, he puts tape or he unplugs anything in the room that emits any sort of light. And then if he goes to like a hotel, he like takes the hangers and squeezes all the curtains together so there's absolutely no light coming in the room, so you can sleep in the pitch black. And that is supposed to increase your like deep and REM sleep, I guess. So those are just some things that increase sleep. But
Yeah.
I mean, I can rattle off a ton of other recovery modalities.
Before we get there, yeah. So sleep is the best one for recovery. So a couple things on sleep, right? So the longer you sleep, so when you sleep, your body actually releases HGH, right? So although HGH typically, when you hear that moniker, it's that's performance enhancing drugs. This guy's on HGH. Like, plot twist, that's something your body naturally creates for most individuals, right? So when you sleep, you have more time in that restorative state. It's kind of like a pit stop, right? So if you were a car and you drove, you're driving in a race, eventually you have to stop, pit stop you up a little bit, get you repaired, fix this, that, and the third. So that's something that becomes super important, right? So now you also have to look at like your lifestyle and things like that, right? So when you talk about like everyone needing different levels of sleep, like there's some people that might have to sleep like 10 hours a night because their day is so demanding, right? So when you have a lot of output, right, you're going to have a lot of recovery for that, right? So whether you're a professional athlete, whether you're any kind of position, depending what you do, like that's going to dictate your kind of like nighttime routine. So one way that I like to look at recovery is it's often talked about like, hey, like we want to make sure you're sleeping well, you're sleeping at the appropriate time, but you also have to take a look at your lifestyle. To be able to recover, you need something to recover from, right? So if you're someone who you sit at home all day and you're looking at screens, or maybe you work from home or you're on your phone a lot, or whatever you do, and your day's not super demanding, come bedtime, it makes sense as to why you're a little wired and stuff like that. Now, some of us naturally neurologically are going to be that way. I myself am a night owl. Um, but you need something to recover from. So like when I have a day where I have a big workout or a big run or stuff like that, as I get into my nighttime routine, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, we're definitely going to sleep good tonight. Right. We killed it in the gym today. We killed it on a run, or I had a busy day, or I was all over the place. And you have that. Right. So to further simplify, look at children and toddlers. Right. And you're just like, oh my God, my kid doesn't sleep and stuff like that. Well, you know what? Tomorrow, our child was just bouncing off the walls and stuff like that. And he was up all night, kept us both up. Okay, I'm going to let him play for a little bit longer so he gets that out of his system. And then boom, right? You sleep a little bit more, right? Because now he has something to recover from. Same thing with dogs when they get the zoomies and things like that, right? So you have to look at your lifestyle and is it a problem of I just don't sleep well? Is it bad sleep habit? Or do I need something to recover from? Like a lot of times, the reason that you can't sleep is because you're not tired. And granted, for some people that may be hard to accept, but like it sometimes it is that simple, right? So reading a book obviously can make you a little tired, make you a little drowsy. The blue light effect is a real thing. Like we know that. Like the more blue light you're exposed to once the sun goes down, the lower release of melatonin that you have, which is why we have melatonin supplements that exist. Personally, for my routine, my wind down routine, as soon as the sun goes down, that's when it starts. So as soon as the sun is down, I generally will keep my apartment in the dark. I might have a little computer screen light, phone screen light, some TV. I don't watch a ton of TV unless there's a sporting event on, but I'll have my blue light glasses on. Mostly because I know that in the evening, right? Because I try to front load my day. So most of my work will happen between 6 a.m. and about 3. Most of my evening is going to be comprised of either catching up on stuff, which would be emails or some programming things on my computer, or to be some recreational time where I might watch TV or something like that. I might play a video game. So my blue light glasses go on as soon as the sun goes down, even if I'm not going to bed for a while. That's one thing that I found that has helped me, especially as a night owl. So I get into that mode where I'm like, okay, I can probably go to bed at any point. And as far as like did I spend enough energy to actually get a good night's sleep and need something to recover from? Absolutely. The other thing and you touched on this too, your sleep schedule is so important. So I work usually Monday through Friday. Sometimes I work Monday through Saturday. The days that I don't work and I don't have to be up at 6, I'll just wake up when the sun rises. But the difference is on the days that I work, I wake up before the sun rises at a set time. So for about a day or two, my sleep schedule shifts. And that first day back, I'm playing catch up almost every single time, regardless of what my health patterns is, right? So the takeaway there is you want your sleep pattern to remain pretty consistent throughout the week on the days you work, on the days you don't work, and things of that nature, because it'll alter your body's being cycling, right? So if it's in this perfect cycle where this is when we wake up, this is when we go to sleep, stuff like that, you have this homeostasis, which your body's going to try to always find. So especially with recovery and sleep, that's one of the things where it's like, hey, which one are we at right now? I don't know. So now we're not going to wake up at 10, but you got to wake up at 5, and now you're exhausted and stuff like that. So those are some best practices that I've kind of run into, and that's kind of how like I approach it and things like that. But especially in the beginning, right? Sometimes if you're having trouble sleeping, you're not tired, right? And you probably need something to recover from.
As you say that, it makes me think like the times I'm not in a training cycle. It's kind of like the off season, or I just trained and raced, and I'm gonna just take a week off. I definitely don't go to sleep early, and I don't rest as well. And I'm like, why is my recovery so terrible? Because I still use my Whoop. And that's the most thing I look at. I wake up in the morning. How many hours of sleep do I get? What's my recovery score? Where's my resting heart rate? And that's pretty much what I use it for. 99% of the time. Like I'll look at the strain and everything if there's some outlier, but the times when I'm not training, I'm like, why is my recovery yellow or red? I didn't do anything yesterday. Oh, because I didn't recover. So like I didn't get any cardiovascular stimulus, and it's interesting. Good point.
Yeah. And sometimes for things like that, it really is just that simple, right? So you can't expect to have a reaction to an environment if you don't put yourself in that environment, right? So with the tired state, right? Obviously the response, your body's response to being tired is to sleep. When you look at everything else too, it's like I want to be this high intensity runner. I want to be the fastest man alive. Okay, how much time do you spend running as fast as you can? If it's very little, you're not
Yeah.
going to be the fast, right? So you have to put yourself in the stimulating situation, right? So if you're looking to be an endurance runner, how often are you spending time in an endurance state? If you're looking to be a weight trainer, a bodybuilder, if you want to build muscle, things like that, how often do you spend in that situation that would dictate the outcome that you're looking at? And a lot of times, like for a lot of people, it's I want to get fit, I want to get healthy and stuff like that. Okay, how much time do you spend in an environment that requires you to work difficult, right? Now I worded it that way for an environment to work difficult because there's plenty of construction workers that are in shape and they don't go to the gym. There's plenty of road workers. There's plenty of, people with demanding jobs that it doesn't always have to necessarily be gym stuff. But if you want your body to induce a change, you have to spend more time in that state that would induce the change, right? So if you want something to heat up, you have to put it in an environment that's hot, right? And the more time you spend there, the hotter said object will be, right? And if you look at that, okay, so how do I apply that to my daily life and things like that? It's like, what's important to me as the outcome, right? So if it's, I want to build muscle, how often do you spend working on your muscles and things like that? If you increase the time, you will get there, right? Because you will adapt to having strain and stimulus, right, to your muscle fibers and things like that. So it's a very, 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 very fascinating topic. So when it comes to nutrition and things like that, that plays a role as well, right? So if you look at your day on Sunday, right, and you notice by Wednesday you're exhausted and you're just kind of gutting it up, right? Whatever's left is what you're displaying. It might be time to look at your diet and say, okay, I need more energy to kind of get through this, especially if you have a pretty decent sleep routine and it's still not making that change. It's like, okay, let me try if I eat a little bit more, right? I have a little bit more energy sources in my diet. Maybe I add some fruits in, maybe I add another meal, another shake, something in there, right? To try to build that gap because that becomes super important, right? You wouldn't take your car and drive it 400 miles and then not fill up the tank and just leave it on E and just hope that like even when you're the driver of a car, when your car's on E, you get a little bit of anxiety. It's like, oh, if I hit a traffic jam, I might not make it. And then, and like, just think of your body that way. And it's like, being tired is an indicator that something's not exactly working right. You might need more fuel. You might need more sleep. You might need more, you might be having withdrawals from a caffeine addiction or something like that. Right. So there's always something to indicate almost like a check engine light, right, going on. And when you look at recovery, it can dictate everything as far as your daily life.
100%. And with nutrition, hydration, and if you're dehydrated, then absorption rates decrease, then you have other muscle issues and whatnot. And the low hanging fruit, like most people wake up and have a cup of coffee, which is a dehydrator. Nothing against caffeine if you use it properly, but most people don't drink water until later in the day. And you always wake up and pee. You always wake up and dump all the water from yesterday, and then you take a diuretic. So, starting your day off with like 16 or 32 ounces of water immediately before your coffee is a good way to aid your recovery right away and doesn't take much effort to do. Which, with the same with the sleep, low effort just consistently is going to get you a noticeable difference in your energy levels and your bounce back from your workouts and your week.
Yeah. And once you have that kind of rolled in, and I'm gonna bring this up because if you think of the world that we live in, it's very capitalistic. It's very advertising, influence this, influence that. You watch football games, you watch basketball games, you see all these recovery modalities. You see hypervolts being used. You see I'm having a brain fart. The legs, what's the leg thing called?
Normatec.
The Normatec, right? Bags that you see on people's legs that inflate and stuff like that. You see massage therapists, you see cryo, you see heat and stuff like that. And there's everything going on. And you could have the best recovery regime from a standpoint of, I use this XYZ, I use all these services. If you're not sleeping right and you're not eating right, none of those things will matter. They're kind of like the supplements to recovery, right? Do they feel great? Yes. When everything else is working on full cylinders, right? And you're not tired. And then they're a fascinating thing. Like I use the example of like cryo, right? So here in Raleigh, I've had the benefit of becoming friends with the owner of a cryotherapy clinic, and they do some compression therapy as well as that. They have tons of great services. It's called iCryo. So if you're ever near one, definitely go check them out. You go into a cryo chamber, you feel great, right? But typically, for recovery and after workout and things like that. But that's not really going to have too much of an effect. And you see places like that, and you see like the ice baths and things of that nature, right? If you first can't sleep well, none of that stuff is going to have the effect that like it's listed to have, right? You might get the mental edge going in an ice bath, but if you can't sleep, your anxiety is going to be through the roof all the time. You're going to be stressed out. Your heart's going to be beating faster for no reason. Your resting heart rate is going to be much higher. So it's definitely some things to consider when you have so much available to us right now, as far as like what can help me recover better.
Yes, I do. I think a lot of those modalities come with status too. So people are like, ooh, I'm not recovering well. What can I buy? Let me get this $300 percussion gun, and that way I can show all my friends on Instagram, or get these huge boots that people are like, what are those? Like, oh, these are my $2,000 recovery boots. Or I have a membership to the cryotherapy place over here. Check me out with my little skull cap and my big mittens as I go into this weird chamber and the temperature drops to negative 180. I mean, I'm guilty of all that, but
same, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without the other pieces, they don't substitute for, you can't get an hour sleep one night and then go hit those modalities and then be cognitively sharp, let alone physically sharp, to perform in the things that you're trying to perform in.
Oh yeah, big time. It is pretty cool going into cryo chambers, though. I will admit.
Here in Connecticut.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with cryo and things like that, I think there are plenty of things on both sides of the aisle that say it's effective, it's not effective, and stuff like that. We know that it does aid a little bit in recovery, but it can also hinder you from a hypertrophy standpoint, depending when you do it. We know there's research to suggest that your stress levels decline, your heart health is improved, your resting heart rate goes down, and stuff like that. So definitely, if you're interested in that, definitely worth taking a look at, doing some research on, try it out. One thing that we kind of know, like if we're exposed to cold temperatures, our blood is going to come into the center of our body to warm our organs to make sure that we don't die. That's why you usually get frostbite from the farthest points away from your heart. As you go into experience some cold temperature chamber like that, the idea is when you come out, the blood is already in your core. As it'll recirculate or to reoxygenate, you'll have a more effective way of what the heart usually does, which is pull deoxygenated blood in, get that blood back out to the body. You feel a little bit better, a little bit more rejuvenated. Maybe there's an area that had a bunch of knots, or an area that's injured and it doesn't have great circulation. That stuff kind of helps. It feels pretty good. So definitely check that out if it's something that you're interested in. But yeah, definitely it's the same conversation with nutrition and supplements as it is with sleep and nutrition, but mostly sleep. And you look at the recovery modalities like the hypervolts and stuff like that. And yes, having a hypervolt does make you cooler because it's quieter than a Theragun. Normatec boots do look like astronaut. It looks like an astronaut suit and feels great. So that also does make you a little bit cooler. But again, take those with grains of salt, and make sure you're having the right pillars in place.
Well said.
Yeah. So I found this to be super interesting. So we both like to run Spartan races and stuff like that. This would be another season upcoming, starting in Jacksonville. Age group competitions in elite, they've eliminated the burpee penalty.
Yeah.
Talk to me about this.
Personally, or for the sport?
Both.
Personally, I hate it because that's how, as a 230-pound, 6'2" runner, I keep up with those little people that are much faster than me, because they fail strength obstacles, which they've already started eliminating for years, like the tire flip and the double sandbag carry. And now, if these little guys have no upper body strength, can't do monkey bars or the rig or the Olympus or all these grip obstacles, now they can do more of what they're good at and not what they're not good at. And no one likes burpees, but it slows them down enough and takes them off their game enough to slow them down to give me an opportunity to catch them. So now I feel like it's becoming more of a cross-country race and less of an obstacle course race, especially if you're smart enough to game the system. Case in point, you and I went to Jacksonville last year, and we did, maybe it was this, we did that race. All right, I'm thinking of the wrong race. Anyways, I did the Fayetteville race, and on Saturday I ran the Beast, and the Beast had the Olympus that was like 8 panels long. So this shit was like far, 30 yards of Olympus, which is already
So
a hard obstacle.
that's a lot.
So I'm hanging on there for the longest time. I finally get to the end. I hit the bell. I drop off. I start running again. My forearms are blown up from all the grip, and I start catching people that I passed or was running with prior, knowing that they failed Olympus, but now they're ahead of me because they didn't do Olympus, the obstacle in the obstacle course race, and instead took the running penalty. And now they're ahead of me in the race. And so on Sunday, when I did the super, my wife was there too, and she only ran the super. And I'm like, Jess, I know you could do Olympus, but it's more advantageous to not do Olympus and take the penalty because you'll be done faster and you'll save your grip for the next obstacle that you need it for than try to complete the obstacle, which you would think would be the point of an obstacle course race. So I don't think I don't like it as me and as someone who's been doing Spartan since 2011, but their side of things is they're trying to get in the Olympics and you can't have burpees as a penalty for an Olympic event. I get that part. But the benefit for people like me or athletes is and in theory, I don't know if this is going to be the case because we never know, but for awards, the awards they'll say is okay, elite's going to be at 9, age group's going to be at 11, and then it's quarter to 11. Elites haven't started their awards yet. They're still watching videos for burpees to figure out who did or didn't do all their burpees and if their burpees were within the standard and who they have to issue penalties to. And then the age group awards will be at like 1:30 for a race that took everybody 30 minutes at 8 a.m. So like you're kind of held hostage there if you performed well to get your award and do the podium. So those are the two sides of the coin, I think. I think also you got lower barrier to entry for people. I mean, you just say the word burpee to your general population clients and they get all skittish and nervous and because they know they can't do monkey bars and a rope climb and a spear throw and the rig. And you're trying to convince them to go do a Spartan race. And they're like, well, how many obstacles are there? 25. In their head, they're like, 25. How many 30 burpees? I can't even do the math on 25 times 30, but I can't do 10 burpees, let alone 1,000 burpees. So how the hell am I ever going to do a Spartan race? So now it's like, okay, if you don't do the obstacle, you just run a little bit more. And they're already not going to run, they'll walk, but it makes it more achievable to complete a race. Not that the open class always does do all their burpees, but people think they do until they go there, and then they realize a lot of people don't do their burpees in the open.
Yeah, I view it the same way. I think one of the things that I learned working with my running coach last year, we focused a lot on compromised running, right? So when no matter what stage you are, whether you're advanced, whether you're just a beginner, like if you're going to run at your pace, you do an obstacle, whether pass or fail, it's going to light you up a little bit. That's what makes them unique, the event unique. Because obviously some of them you might be able to hop over something and you'll be fine, but then you get to a rope climb and your upper body's gassed, or maybe you fall off the Olympus, which is one of the hardest obstacles, and then your body feels like you got hit with a flashbang grenade as you're running through the mud. Like, you know what I mean? It's almost like a great equalizer. So, but my concern is, I mean, if you look at like who wins marathons all the time and who wins all these races, like they're usually slimmer and slender guys. And okay, I'm just going to dart off into the woods. If we're looking at something like let's say I'm a beast at running half marathons. I might have, I had the state record or something like that when in high school and stuff like that. And now I'm just running 6 miles. Absolutely. I could turn the jets on through a little, course that veers off into the woods and stuff like that. While someone else is like, oh, I got to pass this obstacle and things like that. So that's definitely a concern. I think, I understand it for the barrier to entry. It makes sense for the smoothness of the entire operation. It's just definitely a concern there as far as like, the guys like me and you, right? So like when I train in the gym, even if I have a Spartan race coming up, I never change my training. I am still training like a bodybuilder. I never do anything that would directly support any kind of performance for the obstacles themselves. I will run, but I can pass every obstacle. The Olympus does give me grief sometimes, but I can pass every obstacle. And I know my body and I know my strength and stuff like that. And sometimes I might tweak a couple things, but mostly what I was focusing on the last year was running while my body was destroyed. So we do all kinds of stuff, and then can you run while you just got fucked up? And I think that's one of the elements that makes the Spartan race a little grittier than most. That I think it's in the future will be missing, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, so it makes you look at other brands. If you want to do obstacles, then there's other brands like Savage Race, which has mandatory obstacle completion. So you stay there until you get the obstacle. If you can't get the obstacle, then you basically, well, you forfeit your band, but you basically forfeit the race, and then you can complete the rest of the course, but you're not going to be in the standings. And those have pretty hard obstacles. And then at the end of the year, they have the OCR World Championships, or Obstacle Course Race World Championships. It's a individual entity that pulls the obstacles from various races around the world and puts on a singular event and calls themselves the World Championship. That one is also mandatory obstacle completion, and we've seen them like make the obstacles really hard, where the fail rate was like 80% on certain things, and they're like, well, we don't have enough finishers, so we got to make it a little easier. And then other times they make it a little too easy, and everybody gets through, and like, all right, we're gonna make it a little harder. So they've kind of like fine-tuned the needle with difficulty of obstacles, but Spartan hasn't really come out with any new obstacles in years.
Well, they did have that butt slide.
They showed some new stuff at the World Championship, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, I did see one where like you just slide down a hill of mud. They sit on your butt, just slide down like you're going sledding. I saw that one as a new one, which is like, okay, like you must not spend a lot of time in mud. Like that doesn't interest me really. Yeah, it's interesting, definitely. Yeah, we also have like Bone Frog just went under, right?
Yep. They had really good obstacles too.
Yeah,
but I think they had a physical penalty if you couldn't complete it, even in like elite. I don't think it was burpees, but I feel like they had some penalty that you could do if you couldn't get an obstacle or you failed it, which is good. But I don't think they were going back and checking videos and stuff. Like Spartan's at the video point, but I haven't done a Bone Frog in a couple of years, probably since 2019. So I didn't know what their issue or how they like handled failed obstacles for a while. But they had some cool stuff. But maybe it was mandatory completion for elites. I can't remember. But Savage definitely is. And they have some hard obstacles. So like compromise running's huge in all obstacle course races, to your point. It's who can run the fastest under duress. So yeah, you might be able to run a 4-minute mile, but we just made you do a sandbag carry up and down a hill. Now you're running like a 12-minute pace because your body's destroyed. Where someone else that's not as fast, maybe their fast speed is 6 minutes, but they can run a 7:30 after a sandbag carry, so they're going to take the lead there. And then the variable conditions on the trails and the courses and whatnot. But yeah, this giving the runners more time to run, I think.
Yeah.
What if I'm not good at running? Can I do more obstacles and like make up time?
That'd be pretty interesting. And yeah, so when we're talking about compromise running, because I don't think it's something that we've talked too much about here on the podcast, right? So compromise running basically is going to be like you do 20 burpees and then you set out for your 5K run, or you do 20 burpees at the beginning, you do 20 burpees at the turnaround point, something like that. A way that I've done it before, when I look at like mile times and splits and stuff like that, I've rowed for 3,000 meters for time, and then run a mile and a half, and then row for 2,000 meters, and then kind of jog it out after that. Like, or you can use the assault bike, which is Kevin's favorite thing. Get some revolutions there, get some rep. Like you want to feel like you're blasted a little bit, and then you go for your run and stuff like that. And when we were talking about earlier, where it's like you want to spend time in that environment to overcome that obstacles, right? So there's plenty of times in a race, especially an obstacle course race, where something, depending on how you're trained and how you are, there's something that's going to mess with you. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be trudging through the water and you just weren't expecting it. Like I've had it before. My hips are blown up because we're in, hip deep water. And I'm like, oh my God, wasn't expecting that. So now like the next, 5-7 minutes of the race, like I'm staggered and whatnot, or there might've been a huge hill, or like maybe an obstacle jacked you up, or, your upper body smoked and things like that. Right. So you want to put yourself in that environment, that's a great way to do so. If you know that you struggle running up hills, right, run up the Stairmaster. That's a good way to do it. I like to run up the Stairmaster for about a minute, and then I'll get on my threshold pace on the treadmill, and I'll bounce back and forth, maybe half-mile increments, that'll be my run. So maybe I'll set out to run like 4 miles. That's a great way to do that, because obviously when you get to the top of the hill, when you start running again, you're back to flat. But it depends what happens, and a lot of times, like you would be naive to think, regardless of your conditioning level, something on some kind of event isn't going to blow you up. Like, it's coming at some point, and it's how you manage it usually, what you see results wise. All right, brother. Well, it's been fun. I'm sure
Thank
we'll
you.
do this again. Thanks for joining me. So, talked about recovery. Kevin Gregory joined me today. He's the CEO and founder of Underdog Fitness. If you'd like to drop your stuff right now, feel free. Promote yourself.
Yeah, so Underdog Fitness, located in Connecticut, but we do most of our training online for obstacle race prep, DECA specifically. We're very good at that, and you'll see our athletes wearing these bright green jerseys with this giant dog head around the country all year. And if you're in Connecticut, take a look at the DECA schedule, because we'll be hosting some pretty awesome DECA events. We have the Strong and the Mile, where we had a lot of World Championship qualifiers qualify last year. So that's that. Check us out on Instagram. That's our main source of interaction. Thanks, Anthony.
Awesome. Love it. Take it easy.
Bye.